Hello everyone, thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. On this 14th day of November 2020, I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, we've got, let me kick this thing into motion again. Okay, hazardous weather graphic. On the western Arctic coast, there's a winter storm watch out. Again, for the western Arctic coast, and that's for starting Sunday evening and continuing through Monday afternoon for what's described as blizzard-like conditions. 1 to 3 inches of snow in the forecast, and so not really heavy snow, but the 45-mile-an-hour wind gusts that are also in the forecast will blow it around and reduce visibilities to less than a quarter mile at times, if not just whiteout type of visibilities. And again, that's for the area Wainwright, Atasuk, Point Lay, on down to Cape Lisburne. Point Hope, not quite in it. Actually, Point Hope is outside of that watch zone there. And otherwise, no other watches, warnings, or advisories around the state for the interior or southern Alaska, the Panhandle, and also for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, although we've got storm warnings coming into the western Aleutians tomorrow with a pretty active frontal system, as we'll see in a few here later on when we get to the surface charts. Otherwise, distinct lack of storminess occurring, as you can see, over mainland Alaska, the Bering Sea, and the Aleutians, and the Gulf of Alaska. A real weak circulation there south of Prince William Sound, but a pretty snappy storm shows up quite vividly there southwest of the Queen Charlotte Islands. I'll be moving in across the southern island there, but close enough to affect the southern panhandle, especially down toward Dixon Entrance with increasing moisture and wind, but no gale force winds, at least at this point, and winds will be lighter over the central panhandle, but the pressure falls with that system going by to the south and then the building high over the Yukon and interior Alaska. That'll kick the winds up for northern inside water areas, Lynn Canal, especially later tonight and tomorrow, looking at small craft advisory, sustained 30-knot winds out of the north with gusts 45 knots, gale force gusts, and Stevens Passage, small craft advisories. And also winds will be on the increase with high pressure building in over the south central Alaska area, the western Alaska range, on down into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, as well as the Copper River Basin, as strong high pressure builds into the interior. Otherwise, very light snow up along the Arctic coast, but west winds gusted 40 to 50 miles an hour along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast today, particularly around Barter Island, Kaktovik. In those areas, lighter winds back to the west, and north winds about 30 miles an hour. It's Gamble coming down through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, about 36 miles an hour at St. Paul, and moderate rain with hail at Unalaska with west-northwest winds at 35 miles per hour in gusts. They had about 0.15 of an inch of precipitation, and otherwise the area from Yakutat to Latuya Bay picked up about 0.2 of an inch of precipitation today, with much lighter amounts elsewhere across the southeast coast, just 0.06 of an inch, some of which fell as snow as Juneau. And up at Haines, about the same thing there. They had 0.06 of an inch in the last 12 hours. Otherwise, 1/10 of an inch there at Annette Island. So real light, this kind of unsettled, weak trough and low pressure still in the Gulf of Alaska. Onshore flow keeping it unsettled there. Widespread area, very light snow across the eastern Bering Sea with the cold air coming southward, picking up moisture. And again, kind of getting unstable there toward the eastern Aleutians. Mentioned the hail there, moderate rain at Unalaska this afternoon, and light snow along the Alaska Peninsula. But again, amounts were quite light. In fact, I didn't see anywhere with more than 1/100th of an inch water equivalent of snow. Arctic coast, there's a trough to kick the winds up with light snow on the east side there, Kaktovik and Barter Island, another trough with some light snow on the central and western coast. High pressure building over the western Bering Sea, edging its way eastward. You can see on the back side of that the tightening gradient in the frontal boundary with the next system that will be pushing in. And by tomorrow afternoon, it looks like storm force winds out of the southeast for the far Shimianatu area. But real nice day coming up under the ridge axis for Adak and Atka, right up to just west of the Pribilofs towards St. Lawrence Island. So lighter winds and better chance of some clearing there as the northerly winds shift eastward. Kind of breezy. Look for gusts 50 miles an hour for the Alaska Peninsula. And not so windy for the eastern Aleutians, but snow showers and colder temperatures, snowfall levels near sea level there from Unmak Island all the way up to the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, more wind, south central Alaska tomorrow, colder but drier and clearer. And lingering clouds there along and north of the eastern Alaska Range, upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country to Eagle, all the way up to the Yukon River there. And again, better conditions there, drier and less wind for the Arctic coast. Still some snow showers with weak flow coming around the top of that ridge. And big storm moves in tonight into the Queen Charlotte Islands. And for tomorrow, now we've got the Arctic high in over the central interior, tighter gradient across southern Alaska with gusty outflow winds, Copper River Delta, Prince William Sound, as well as Resurrection Bay and the western Alaska Range to Bristol Bay. Still kind of breezy for the Alaska Peninsula, but winds markedly lighter for the eastern Aleutians with high pressure building in. And still some troughs traveling from southwest to northeast there. That'll bring milder temperatures to the western, even the central Arctic coast tomorrow with some slight chance of some light, or with chance of light snow at times. And big storm coming into the western Aleutians, again, storm force winds into the far western Aleutians, call it 45 knots to Amchitka Island, and winds starting to come up for Adak as that high pressure shifts off to the east. And so not a bad day, at least in the afternoon, for Unmak Island. Lingering light snow shower possible for the Unalaska Island area, especially the Alaska Peninsula, but winds lighter. And mostly clear Kodiak Island, southern Alaska. Chance of flurries there on the north side of the eastern Alaska Range, but dry for the Panhandle as that low center pulls off to the into British Columbia. And then for the Monday outlook, chance of showers along the central and south coast, light showers of mixed nature there along the Panhandle. Really basically a dry day with some variable cloudiness and still pretty windy over the northern inside waters with that 1,034 millibar high now in over the Northwest Territories, ridging into the central interior and then back down in toward Bristol Bay. So clear, cold temperatures, lighter winds for southern Alaska into the central interior, and then pretty good trough. That's what's bringing the winter storm warning to the western Arctic coast tomorrow night into Monday there, with snow and blowing snow advancing across the north slope to the eastern Arctic coast in the afternoon. Clearing out St. Lawrence Island, eastern Bering Sea, as that front pushes wind and rain into the from Adak and Atka early on in toward the Fox Islands by afternoon. Otherwise, showers behind that with high pressure trying to build in once again into the Chimay-Attu area. Otherwise, maybe a chance of some moisture might reach to the east side of Kodiak, Fognak Island there with that east-northeast flow, but that's just a slight risk. Probably be just another dry day, mostly clear with a few clouds. And for the lows tonight, pretty cold, 15 to 20, 25 below up over the central eastern interior, coldest over the upper Yukon Valley. And temperatures in the 20s, lower 30s for the Panhandle, down into the teens, say 5 to 20 for south central Alaska, below zero Copper River Basin, as well as the Matanuska or the Kuskokwim Valley. Lower to mid 20s out along the southwest coast, 30s Bering Sea, Aleutians, and Pribilofs, and below zero eastern Beaufort Sea coast, but milder southwest flow keeps it in the lower 20s for the far western Arctic coast. Highs tomorrow near freezing there, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, to 23 around Point Barrow, to lower teens on the east side, and staying below zero over the interior, and 30s to near 40 for the Panhandle, and 20s southern Alaska. Looking at lows on Monday morning, even colder, 20 to 30 below for the central eastern interior from the Brooks Range southward, and 15 to 20 below for the Copper River Basin. And so Sitting Valley could see some areas dropping below zero, like around Willow. Easily could drop to 5-10 below zero with single numbers and teens elsewhere across the Kenai Peninsula. And temperatures ranging from the mid-teens over the northern Panhandle to the mid to upper 20s down south, upper 20s Kodiak Island, above freezing for the Aleutians and Bering Sea. And then for the afternoon highs on Monday, looking at lower to mid 30s there for the western Arctic coast, so above freezing all the way up to Point Lay, actually Wainwright up to 33, mid 20s on the east side, staying below zero over the Brooks Range down to the eastern interior, Tanana Valley, near zero Copper River Basin, and lower 20s northern Panhandle to near 40 down toward Ketchikan and Klawock and Craig, mid 30s Kodiak Island, teens to Sitting Valley.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphics, Sunday morning, IFR there, Brooks Range on out across the eastern North Slope, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, marginal VFR, western Arctic coast, and a swath of marginal VFR from the northwest coast there down across portions of the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, eastern Bering Sea, with some lingering IFR there along the Alaska Peninsula. VFR central Aleutians, and then for Kiska to Shimianatu, marginal VFR. Marginal VFR starting the day north side of the Alaska Range, covering most areas from the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country right on up toward, beyond Eagle, up toward along the, almost to the Porcupine River. Otherwise, Copper River Basin, south central Alaska, VFR. Some marginal VFR, possibly Kachemak Bay, east side of Kodiak Island, maybe into Resurrection Bay. And then eastern North Gulf Coast, Panhandle, VFR. For the afternoon, VFR, southeast coast, southern Alaska, western Alaska. Lingering marginal VFR there, north side of the central and eastern Alaska Range, again across the 40-mile country and upper and mid-Tanana Valley, with some marginal VFR, Brooks Range North Slope, and then IFR on the central and western Arctic coast, possible IFR on the east side, and possible IFR for Gamble. Savungo will be marginal, and a narrow band of marginal VFR south from St. Lawrence Island, just catching the Pribilofs and clipping the west side of Nunavik Island down to the Ahkun Island area and the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Sitkinak, Trinity Islands look a little marginal, and then some IFR slipping on up into the western Aleutians. And that area of IFR is associated with the next front, and that will push eastward Monday morning to Adak and Atka. Central eastern Bering Sea, good VFR right up across Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, all the way across southern Alaska. Marginal VFR, most of the Gulf of Alaska, eastern North Gulf Coast, and along the coast of the Panhandle. And then the southern southeast coast, Prince of Wales Island, Annette, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, over toward Hyder and Stewart, and then north to Wrangell and Petersburg, probably marginal, otherwise VFR. IFR there for the long mountains, northwest coast, western central Arctic coast. And for the afternoon, that area of IFR kind of slips eastward to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and extends southwestward back into the North Tack Valley, marginal VFR, Kobuk Valley, northern Koyukuk, and the northern Seward Peninsula. Otherwise, to the south and southeast and east of that area, good VFR all the way down Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula. Lingering marginal VFR possible near or just south of Yakutat, and then kind of just hugging the coastline of the Panhandle, otherwise VFR over the inside waters. And for the Aleutians, band of IFR now makes its way to Unmak Island, exiting Atka with marginal VFR back to the west. And for passes Anatuvik and Adigan, marginal VFR tomorrow, Lake Clark Merrill VFR, same thing for windy and rainy, VFR flying conditions for both windy and rainy. Isabel, marginal, and for Mentasta, marginal VFR. Tanita, marginal, let me back it up here. Let's see, Mentasta, marginal VFR, Tanita, VFR, good VFR for Portage, and Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, not much to look at here at the surface. South of St. Lawrence Island, close to Nunavak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, and hugging the coastline all the way around, cutting across, kind of again bisecting the Panhandle from northwest to southeast. And then 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the western central Aleutians ahead of that next front. And with that, a slug of moisture with it. So look for considerable moderate rime icing to push into the western Aleutians to about as far east as Amchitka Island. Otherwise, Adak and Atka in the clear, as well as most everywhere else. Mainland Alaska icing free, including the Panhandle and Arctic coast. Jet stream. See the jet with the storm coming in the western Aleutians there, 135 knots. Otherwise, high pressure to the east. Slowly pushing eastward, and that northerly flow now making it onto the coastline and into the western interior, 85 to 110 knots down across the Alaska Peninsula. Light winds over the eastern interior, and not too bad for the Panhandle as well. We've got northerlies 40 to 50 knots, Kuskokwim Delta there down to the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure central Bering Sea, 90 knots southerlies, about 70 knots just south of the Shimia area. Otherwise, northerlies 40 to 45 knots there. Whoops, a little too quick. There for the southwest interior across the Alaska Peninsula, and northerlies up to 45 there for the northwest Susitna Valley. Otherwise, lighter farther north, ridging, pushing into the northwest interior, Panhandle. A little breezy on the south coast, but not too bad. Moderate chop, southwest interior, Alaska Peninsula, central and western Aleutians.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is Eric Stevens, our good friend from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at UAF. And thanks for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here, Dave.
And we love to hear about all the fascinating developments, new and old, and how we're using the tools here, especially around Alaska. And I've got to think that, satellite meteorology right now is a fascinating time to be involved in. If we go back to the first satellite, Tyros, back in 1960, I think is when we got some of those first pictures. Weather and meteorology probably changed that day for a whole lot of people, and it's still changing today, right?
Oh, you know it. Satellite imagery is so important, and it's getting better all the time. Yeah. Of course, never perfect, but especially for us in Alaska, where there are other data sets like radars and weather balloons are so thinly spread. Right. The satellite is the great equalizer because the satellite sees everything.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We've got one particular issue in volcanic ash detection.
That's a big deal here. Yeah.
You know it. If you fly an airplane into volcanic ash, your jet engine might just fail. And an airplane without engines is in a world of hurt. Sure. So if there's a volcano that goes off, satellite imagery is the way to track that plume of ash and to tell pilots this is where you need to not be to avoid this ash plume. And there's a phrase out there, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Okay.
Well, it turns out, what we're going to discuss today, that the difference is everything. There's a technique called channel differencing.
Okay.
That if you take one piece of the spectrum of what the satellite detects and a slightly different wavelength of that spectrum, even though those two images might look similar, magical things happen when you subtract one from the other. And they reveal information that was already there, but it was hard to find until you did that subtraction.
This sounds like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure when he's got those fancy glasses and he's flipping one up and back and forth. I mean, is this what we're talking about?
Well, let's go more highbrow and talk Michelangelo.
Oh,
so apparently Michelangelo made some amazing sculpture and someone said, Michael, that's amazing. How did you do it? And Michelangelo's reply allegedly was, well, in that rock, the statue was already in there.
Right.
I just scraped away the unnecessary bits. In satellite meteorology, sometimes there are meteorological features that are in the data, but you can't see it until you combine or difference some of the channels.
Okay.
And we've got a case, good old Pavlov volcano goes off now and then.
Sure.
And you can observe directly a picture of the volcano. Just take it with your iPhone. You can see a volcano going off.
Yep.
Right. But if you want to get the broad view, we need satellite to do that. Now, there are a couple of wavelengths that we can look at. So what's a wavelength? That's the amount of space between a peak and a valley and another peak in a certain part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're going to look at 12 micron wavelength and 10.8 micron wavelength.
What is a micron?
So what's a micron? Yeah, we're getting into the geek department now. A micron is a unit of length, and it is quite tiny. We're looking at what's called long wave wavelengths.
Okay.
But it takes 25,000 of these microns to make an inch. A human blood cell is about 5 microns across. So when we're talking about 12 micron imagery as allegedly long wave, well, that's relative.
Pretty short for light.
Yeah, it's other part of the, it's just an expression for the spectrum there.
Okay.
So we can look at a 12 micron image, say a satellite image. At 12 microns, we're seeing a heat signature here, really, and the way this color enhancement works is the yellow and the red stuff is high cold clouds down here over the Gulf of Alaska into South Central. And if you were asked, where do you find the volcanic ash plume in this image?
Hey, where do you find the volcanic plume in this image?
It's hard to do. I'm not sure I could find it. If you were to look at this image and just say, show me what jumps out at you here, I'd say, well, nothing really. Well, let's look. So 12 micron doesn't help us. Let's look at 10.8 microns.
All right.
All right, look at that. It's practically the same image. So where's this volcanic ash? Can't find it at 12 microns, can't really see it at 10.8, but when we subtract one channel from the other, magically the plume appears. The color enhancement here highlights the ash in blue.
Wow.
The information was already there, but we couldn't find it until we subtracted one channel from another.
Very interesting.
It's almost magical. Similarly, let's say you're looking for fog up on the North Slope. It's kind of a foggy neighborhood.
Sure.
In 11 micron and 3.9 micron, we've got a 3.9 micron image here. it's a big fuzzy blur over Barrow. We can't see where the fog is. But the information is lurking in there waiting for us to reveal it. All we have to do is find that difference between the 11 micron and the 3.9, and then this image becomes this image, and the fog bank jumps right out, and you can see it up there at Barrow. Now, you got to choose the right tool for the job.
Sure.
Like they say, you open your toolbox, all kinds of stuff in there. What do we need for this particular task? If you want to find volcanic ash, we look at 12 and 10.8 micron, find that difference. If you want to find fog, we'll look at 11 and 3.9 micron, find that difference. It's great, different tools for different jobs. Of course, there's always caveats and gotchas, but this fog procedure, it only works at night, because when the sun comes up, it gets in the way. So every product has its strengths and limitations, and in meteorology, the challenge is using the right tool for the right job, and these are some of those tools.
And discovery is still happening, even with meteorology. The weather's been around for a long time, but the tools that are being developed to understand the meteorology is fascinating and still very new science.
It's such a young science. We've come so far. I'm getting old enough now that I can literally say that, when I was a boy, we didn't have this kind of thing. And there's new things happening all the time. New satellites will be launched in coming years that will have better instruments than ever before. It's an exciting time, and this is so helpful for Alaska because satellites help fill in the gaps between other ways of observing the weather. Satellites, the great equalizer for Alaska.
Yeah, and help so many people stay safe in so many ways every day up here in the last frontier.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, protecting lives and property.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. We love to hear about this fascinating information, and boy, it just makes me want to go watch satellite pictures all day. So hopefully we're inspiring more people to do the same thing, and just be curious. It's a wonderful thing. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, pretty solid there from the central Arctic coast eastward there, a little thinner in Mackenzie River Bay, and also off the Point Barrow area, just up to the north there. But ice thickening up or expanding out away from the coastline there on the western coast, and then also expanding over Kotzebue Sound, and a little bit over Norton Sound, or Norton Bay as well. And coastal water forecast, pretty windy for Lincoln Isle Glacier Bay, north sustained 30 knots tomorrow, small craft advisories, gale force gust to 45 knots out of the north, northeast 25, gusts 35 knots for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait, northwest winds 25 knots, seas at 5 feet. Northwest 25 also along the coast of Prince of Wales Island with 11-foot seas, and then dropping off to 20 knots there from, say, along the coastline, Port Alexander up to around Sitka, north coast, easterlies 10 to 15 knots, seas 6 feet. And for the, go the right direction here, for the Monday outlook, we've got gale warnings out for Lincoln Isle and Glacier Bay now for north winds 35 knots, definitely higher gusts there in those windier island areas. And small craft advisory, Stevens Passage, north 25, seas 5 feet, and 15 knots for Clarence Strait. And for the south coast, northeast winds 20 knots on Monday with 8-foot seas, and east winds 20 to 25 knots on the north coast. Prince William Sound, northerlies 20 knots, seas 4 feet. North Gulf Coast, northeast 20 knots, 6-foot seas. And for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, north to northwest, 30 knots, small craft advisory, seas 9 to 10 feet. And southern Cook Inlet, north at 20, north of the Foreland Zone, north at 15, with seas 3 to 5 feet. And then for Monday, northern Cook Inlet, northeast at 15 with 3-foot seas. North 20 continues for southern Cook Inlet. Small craft advisories, Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, both out of the northwest at 25 knots and both with 8-foot seas. North Gulf Coast, north to northeast winds, 20 knots, seas 5 feet. Small craft advisories now for Prince William Sound, northerlies at 25 knots with 4-foot seas. And for the Kodiak Island, greater Kodiak Island area there, marine-wise, 25 knots for Shelikof Strait, 30 knots on the east side of the island, sea 6 to 10 feet. And from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, northwest winds 30 knots, 10 to 11-foot seas, Bering Sea side of the peninsula, north at 30, and small craft advisories also for Bristol Bay, winds north at 25 knots, sea 7 feet. And then for Monday, let's see, south side of the Alaska Peninsula from Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape, southeast winds 15 knots, seas 5 feet. Bering Sea side there, east winds at 20 with 6-foot seas, Bristol Bay northeast 20. And Kodiak Island, small craft advisories, northerlies, 25 knots, 5 to 7 foot seas. Fox Islands tomorrow for, basically small craft advisories, north 30 knots, beginning to edge downward for Nikolsky in the afternoon, but small craft advisories, 20 to 30 knot winds with 9 to 13 foot seas. And 30 to 35 knot southeast winds on the increase there in the afternoon for Adak and Atka, and that'll pick up to about 45 knots. And then storm warnings from Kiska to Shemya, and 45 knots for Amchitka Island, with seas as high as 25 feet out toward the far western Aleutians. They'll swing around to the southwest at 30 knots for Shemya and Atuta Kiska, and 35 knot southwest winds with 26-foot seas for Amchitka Island. And high-end gales there for the Adak-Atka area, south to southwest, 40 to 45 knots, seas 17 to 25 feet. And on Alaska Island, south to southeast, 30-knot winds, seas to 13 feet. Unmak Island, southerlies of 40 knots with seas up to 20 feet. Southwest coast, northerly winds tomorrow, small craft advisory level winds, 25 to 30 knots out of the north, 7 to 10-foot seas, north 20 for the Pribilofs, northwest 20 for St. Matthew Island, southwest 25 for St. Lawrence Island. Outlook for Monday, Norton Sound, south 15, but small craft advisory, southerly winds 25 knots for St. Lawrence Island, and south 30 knots along the Yukon Delta coast, east winds 25 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta coastline. Pribilof, south 30 knots, seas 14 feet. Gale warnings for St. Matthew Island, southeast 35 knots with 20-foot seas. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, brisk wind advisory there on the far eastern end toward Demarcation Point, a little to the west. Otherwise, the eastern and central coast, west winds at 20 knots. Small craft advisories from Point Lay all the way down to Whale, southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Those will be even stronger on Monday, southwest 30 to 35 knots with the gales from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson at 35 knots. Southwest 30 knots there for much of the remainder of the coast, and 25 knots for the east side. And for tonight, increasing winds along the Alaska Range.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.